The throne room was silent as Selara walked toward the ancient seat of power. Thousands of Ethoni nobles watched her with their large silver eyes. Their long robes touched the polished floor. Their hands were folded in respect. This was the moment she had prepared for all her life, but she had hoped it would not come so soon. Her mother, the great Queen Valendra, had died 7 days ago. The illness took her quickly, and now Selara stood alone. She was young for a queen, only 30 cycles old. Among her people, that was barely an adult. But the crown did not wait for anyone to be ready. She climbed the steps to the throne and turned to face her people. The crown was placed upon her head by High Advisor Vareth. It was heavy, not just in weight but in meaning. She was now responsible for 12 billion souls across 40 worlds. Long live the Princess Queen. The crowd spoke as one. Selara sat down and felt the cold stone beneath her. She remembered sitting in her mother's lap on this very throne when she was a child. She remembered feeling safe. Now, she felt only the weight of duty. After the ceremony, she retired to her private chambers. The palace was quiet at night. The stars outside her window shone bright against the purple sky. She stood there for a long time, looking up at them. Her mind went back to a day she could never forget. She was only a child then, 10 cycles old. The HFY War had been raging for 3 years, and everyone said the Ethoni were losing. The swarm was too many. Their ships filled the sky like locusts. They consumed everything in their path. Then they came to her world. She remembered the alarms, the screaming, the guards rushing her mother and her through the palace halls. She remembered the shields failing and the horrible sound of Vareth soldiers breaking through the walls. They were tall creatures with sharp limbs and no eyes. They moved fast and killed without mercy. Selara had been separated from her mother in the chaos. She found herself alone in a courtyard, surrounded by smoke and fire. A Vareth soldier spotted her and moved toward her. She could not run. Her legs would not obey her. She closed her eyes and waited for death. But death did not come. She heard a loud sound. A weapon firing. She opened her eyes and saw the Vareth soldier falling. Standing behind it was a creature she had never seen before. It was smaller than an Ethoni, with soft skin and 2 eyes that burned with fierce light. It wore heavy armor covered in dust and blood. A human. The human looked at her and spoke in a voice that was rough but kind. "Run, little one. Get to the evacuation ships. Do not stop for anything." Then the human turned and charged toward more Vareth soldiers. Selara ran. She ran until her legs gave out, and then a guard found her and carried her the rest of the way. She made it to the ships. She survived. Later, she learned what happened. The humans had arrived just in time. A small fleet of their warships had broken through the Vareth blockade and landed soldiers on the surface. They were few in number, but they fought like nothing anyone had ever seen. One human in particular led the ground assault. He rallied the broken Ethoni defenders and led a counterattack against the swarm. He held the line for 6 hours until reinforcements arrived. By the time the battle was over, the Vareth advance had been stopped. The tide of the war had turned. That human's name was Daniel Cole. Selara learned his name years later when she studied the history of the war. She saw images of him receiving no medals, no honors. He had refused them all. After the war ended, he simply disappeared. No one knew where he went. This bothered her deeply. Among the Ethoni, heroes were celebrated for generations. Songs were written about them. Statues were built in their honor. Their names were spoken with reverence forever. But this human, who had saved her world and possibly her life, had been forgotten. She asked her mother about it once. Queen Valendra had smiled sadly and said that humans were strange creatures. They did not seek glory the way others did. Some of them ran from it. Solara did not understand. How could someone run from gratitude? Now, standing at her window as the new queen, she thought about Daniel Cole again. She owed him her life. Her people owed him everything. And yet, he had received nothing in return. She made a decision. The next morning, she called High Advisor Vorith to her chambers. He was an old Ithoni with gray scales and wise eyes. He had served her mother for 50 years, and now he would serve her. "I wish to find someone," she told him. "A human soldier from the HFY War. His name is Daniel Cole." Vorith's eyes narrowed. "I know of him, my queen. He is a legend among both humans and our people. But he vanished after the war. No one has seen him in 10 years. Then we will search for him," Solara said. Vorith hesitated. "May I ask why, my queen?" "Because I owe him a debt. My people owe him a debt. He saved our world, and we gave him nothing. I will not let that stand." Vorith was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke carefully. "Humans are unpredictable creatures. They do not think like us. Perhaps this Daniel Cole does not wish to be found. Perhaps he had his reasons for disappearing." Solara met his gaze. "Then I will hear those reasons from him myself. Prepare a ship. I will go to human space." Vorith looked shocked. "My queen, you cannot simply leave the throne world. You have just been crowned. There are matters of state, ceremonies, treaties to sign." "Those things can wait," Solara said. "This cannot. I was a child when that human saved my life. I never thanked him. I never even knew his name until years later. Now I am queen, and I have the power to do what I could not do before." She turned back to the window and looked up at the stars. "I will find Daniel Cole," she said, "and I will give him the honor he deserves, whether he wants it or not." Vorith sighed, but he bowed his head. He had served her mother long enough to know when an argument was lost. "As you wish, my queen. I will prepare the ship." 3 days later, Solara departed her throne world with a small escort. Her ship was fast and quiet, designed for diplomatic missions rather than war. She watched her world grow smaller through the viewing port until it was just another point of light among millions dots somewhere out there. In the vast reaches of human space was the man who had changed everything, and she was going to find him. Earth was not what Solara expected. She had seen images of the human homeworld in her studies, but pictures could not capture the feeling of seeing it with her own eyes. It was a small world, blue and green and white, floating in the darkness like a precious gem. Billions of humans lived on its surface. From here, they had spread across the stars and built an empire that rivaled the oldest civilizations in the galaxy. Her ship landed at a diplomatic port, near a great human city. The air was different here, heavier. The gravity pulled at her bones in ways she was not used to. Humans had evolved on a harsh world, and their bodies were built to survive conditions that would kill most other species. This was part of what made them such effective warriors. Ambassador Claire Morgan met her at the landing pad. She was a human woman with brown hair and kind eyes. She wore the formal robes of a diplomat and smiled warmly as Solara approached. "Princess Queen Solara," Claire said, bowing her head in greeting. "It is an honor to welcome you to Earth. We were surprised by your visit. Our governments usually arrange these things months in advance." "I apologize for the short notice," Solara said, "but I am not here on official business. I am here on a personal matter." Claire raised an eyebrow. "Personal? That is unusual for a head of state." Solara walked beside the ambassador as they entered the diplomatic building. It was large and impressive, built of stone and glass. Human guards stood at attention as she passed. They were tall and strong, their faces calm but watchful. "I am looking for someone," Solara said. "A human soldier who fought in the HFY War. His name is Daniel Cole." Claire stopped walking. Her expression changed from polite curiosity to something deeper. Daniel Cole, she repeated. That is a name I have not heard in a long time. You know of him? Everyone knows of him, Claire said. At least, everyone who lived through the war. He's considered a hero among our people. Some call him the man who saved the galaxy. She paused. But he does not see himself that way. They entered a private meeting room. Claire offered Solara a seat and poured 2 cups of tea. Human tea was bitter, but Solara drank it out of politeness. What can you tell me about him? Solara asked. Claire sat across from her and was quiet for a moment. Daniel Cole enlisted in the military when he was young. He rose through the ranks quickly because he had a gift for leadership. When the Varith War began, he was assigned to the 4th Expeditionary Division under Commander Nathan Price. I have heard this name as well, Solara said. Nathan is retired now. He lives on Earth, not far from here. He and Daniel were close during the war. Claire took a sip of her tea. The 4th Division was sent to reinforce the Ethoni homeworld when the swarm broke through your defenses. They were outnumbered 10-1. By all logic, they should have failed. But Daniel led a ground assault that turned the battle. I know this part of the story, Solara said. I was there. I was a child, trapped in the palace when the fighting reached us. A human soldier saved my life that day. I believe it was Daniel. Claire stared at her. You were the child in the palace? The one from the stories? There are stories about me? Among our soldiers, yes. Daniel mentioned once that he found a young Ethoni girl in the courtyard and told her to run. He never knew if she survived. Claire smiled softly. He will be glad to know you did. Solara felt something stir in her chest. All these years, he had not known. Where is he now? Claire's smile faded. That is the difficult part. After the war ended, Daniel testified before the United Earth Council. He gave his report, answered their questions, and then asked to be discharged from the military. They offered him a promotion to general. He refused. They offered him a seat on the Defense Council. He refused that too. Then he simply walked away. Walked away? To where? His last known location was a small agricultural colony called Haven's Rest. It is a quiet world, far from the galactic core. Farmers and settlers mostly. No military presence, no major cities. Just fields and sky. Solara was confused. Why would a hero choose such a place? Claire looked at her with eyes full of understanding. Because he does not see himself as a hero, Princess Queen. Some humans carry their wars with them long after the fighting stops. The things Daniel did, the choices he made, they saved millions of lives. But they also cost lives. And for some people, that weight never goes away. Solara thought about this. Among her people, warriors were honored for their victories. The cost was simply part of the duty. But humans seemed different. They felt things more deeply, perhaps. Or perhaps they just did not know how to let go. Can you help me find him? She asked. Claire nodded. I can give you the coordinates of Haven's Rest and what records we have on Daniel's whereabouts. But I should warn you, if he has chosen to disappear, he may not welcome visitors, especially a queen who wants to give him honors. I understand the risk, Solara said, but I must try. I owe him that much. Claire studied her for a long moment, then stood and walked to a console on the wall. She entered a few commands, and a holographic map appeared. It showed a small blue world on the edge of human space. Haven's Rest, Claire said. It is 3 days from here at standard speed. I will arrange transport for you. Thank you, Ambassador. Claire turned to face her. May I offer some advice, Princess Queen? Solara nodded. When you find Daniel, do not expect him to be the man from the stories. War changes people. Sometimes it breaks them. And sometimes the strongest people are the most broken of all. She paused. Go to him not as a queen seeking a hero, but as a person seeking another person. That is the only way he will listen. Saylara considered these words. She had spent so many years building an image of Daniel Cole in her mind. The unstoppable warrior, the savior of worlds. But Claire was right. He was just a man who had done extraordinary things and then walked away from all of it. Perhaps that was the most extraordinary thing of all. I will remember your advice, Saylara said. Thank you. 2 days later, a ship left Earth and set course for Haven's Rest. Saylara stood at the viewing port and watched the stars streak past. She was closer now, closer to finding the man who had haunted her memories for so long. She did not know what she would find when she arrived, but she knew she had to see this through. For her people, for herself, and for the human who had told a frightened little girl to run and never look back to see if she made it. She had made it, and now it was time for him to know. Haven's Rest was a world of golden fields and endless sky. Saylara's ship descended through soft white clouds and landed on a small platform outside a quiet town. There were no crowds waiting for her, no guards or officials. Just a handful of farmers who looked up briefly from their work, then returned to it without much interest, thought this was not a world that cared about queens and politics. It was a world of simple things. Growing food, raising families, living peacefully under a warm sun. Saylara left her escort at the ship and walked into town alone. She wore simple clothing instead of her royal robes. Ambassador Claire had told her to approach Daniel as a person, not a queen, and she intended to follow that advice. The town was small. A few dozen buildings made of wood and stone. A market where farmers sold their crops. Children playing in the streets. Old people sitting on benches and talking about weather and harvests. It was so different from her throne world that Saylara felt like she had stepped into another universe. She asked around for Daniel Cole. Most people knew the name. He lived on a farm outside town, they said. Kept to himself mostly. A good man, quiet and hard-working, but not one for socializing. She followed the directions they gave her and walked along a dirt road that wound through the fields. The crops were tall and green. The air smelled of earth and growing things. It was peaceful in a way that Saylara had never known. Her life had been filled with ceremony and duty since she was born. She had never just walked through a field and listened to the wind. After an hour of walking, she came to a small farmhouse. It was simple but well built, with a wooden porch and a red roof. Behind it stretched rows of crops and a small barn. A man was working in the field, his back to her as he knelt in the dirt and tended to his plants. She watched him for a moment. He was older than she expected. His hair was gray at the temples, and his skin was weathered by years of sun and labor. His hands were rough and dirty from work. This was not the warrior from her memories. This was a farmer, an ordinary man living an ordinary life. She walked closer, and he heard her footsteps. He turned, and she saw his face for the first time in 10 years. His eyes were the same. That fierce light she remembered from the palace courtyard was still there, buried beneath layers of weariness and time. He stood slowly, brushing dirt from his knees. His expression was guarded, but not hostile. He looked at her the way someone looks at a stranger who has wandered onto their land by accident. "Can I help you?" he asked. "Daniel Cole?" she said. His eyes narrowed slightly. "That depends on who is asking. My name is Saylara. I am the queen of the Ethoni Dominion." Something flickered across his face. Recognition, perhaps. Or maybe just resignation. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed and wiped his hands on his pants. "I figured someone would come eventually," he said. "Did not expect it to be a queen. May I speak with you?" He looked at her for a while, studying her face. Then he nodded and gestured toward the farmhouse. "Come inside. I will make some tea." They sat at a small wooden table in his kitchen. The house was simple inside, clean but sparse. There were no decorations on the walls, no medals or trophies or photographs, just the bare essentials of a quiet life. Daniel poured 2 cups of tea and sat across from her. His movements were slow and deliberate. He seemed like a man who had learned patience the hard way. "So," he said, "why is the Queen of the Ethoni Dominion sitting in my kitchen?" "I came to thank you," Selara said, "and to offer you the honor you deserve." He shook his head slowly. "I have already refused honors. Many times. From your people and from mine. I know. But I wanted to ask you myself, to understand why." Daniel looked down at his tea. Steam rose from the cup and curled in the air. What happened during the war was not heroic. It was survival. I did what I had to do to keep people alive. That is all. That is all. You saved my world, Selara said. You turned the tide of the entire war. I also got a lot of good people killed. His voice was flat, but there was pain beneath it. Soldiers who trusted me, followed my orders, died because of decisions I made. He looked up at her. That is not something I want to celebrate. Selara was quiet. She had expected resistance, but not this. Not a man so weighed down by guilt that he could not see his own worth. "I was there that day," she said softly. "When the Verith broke through the palace shields, I was a child, 10 years old. I got separated from my mother in the chaos and ended up alone in a courtyard." Daniel's expression shifted. His eyes grew distant, as if he was looking at something far away. "A Verith soldier found me," she continued. "I could not move. I was too scared. I thought I was going to die." She paused. Then a human appeared. He killed the soldier and told me to run. He said not to stop for anything. Daniel closed his eyes. His jaw tightened. I remember that day. I remember the courtyard. There was a girl, small, with silver eyes. She looked so terrified. He opened his eyes and looked at her. "That was you?" "Yes." He stared at her for a long moment. "I never knew if you made it out. Things were so chaotic. By the time the battle was over, I did not even remember telling you to run. It all blurred together." "I made it out because of you," Selara said. "I survived because you were there. And now I am queen because you gave me the chance to grow up." Daniel said nothing. He just sat there, looking at her like he was seeing a ghost. His hands trembled slightly around his cup. "I did not come here to give you medals you did not want," Selara said. "I came because I needed to see you. To thank you in person. To tell you that what you did mattered. That I am alive because of you." He shook his head again, but this time there was something different in his face. The walls he had built around himself were cracking. "I appreciate you coming," he said quietly. "But I am not the man you think I am. I am just a farmer now. Whatever I was during the war, that person is gone." Selara leaned forward. "I do not believe that. The man who saved me, who charged into battle against impossible odds, who refused glory because he could not forget those he lost, that man is not gone. He is sitting right in front of me." Daniel looked at her with eyes full of something she could not name. Pain, perhaps. Or hope. Or both. "Why does it matter so much to you?" he asked. "Because I owe you my life," she said. "And because my people owe you everything. You deserve to know that what you sacrificed was not for nothing." The sun was setting outside. Golden light poured through the window and painted the room in warm colors. They sat there in silence, two people from different worlds, connected by a moment of violence and mercy that had happened a decade ago. Finally, Daniel spoke. "Stay for dinner. We can talk more. But I'm not promising anything." Salara nodded. "That is all I ask." And for the first time since she arrived, she saw something that might have been the beginning of a smile on his weathered face. Daniel cooked a simple meal of vegetables from his garden and bread he had baked that morning. Salara watched him move around the kitchen with practiced ease. His hands, which had once held weapons and commanded armies, now handled pots and pans with the same careful attention. They ate at the small wooden table as the last light of day faded outside. The food was plain but good. Salara had eaten at the finest tables in the galaxy, but there was something special about this meal. Something honest. "You grow all of this yourself?" she asked. "Most of it," Daniel said. "The soil here is good. Takes work, but it is worth it." He paused. "Building something instead of destroying it. That is why I came here. How long have you lived on this world?" "Almost 9 years now. Arrived not long after the war ended. Bought this land with what little money I had saved and started farming." He looked out the window at his fields, now dark under the rising stars. "It was hard at first. I did not know much about growing things. Made a lot of mistakes. But I learned." Salara set down her fork. "May I ask you something personal? You came all this way. Might as well. What happened to you after the war? Not the facts. I know those. I mean, what happened inside you?" Daniel was quiet for a long time. He pushed food around his plate but did not eat. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and tired. "The war broke something in me," he said. "I do not mean that as a figure of speech. I mean something actually broke. The part of me that could look at myself in the mirror and feel like a good person. But you saved so many lives. And I took so many more." He looked at her with haunted eyes. "Do you know what it takes to win a war? It is not bravery or strategy or superior weapons. It is making choices that no one should have to make. Ordering men into positions where you know they will die, because their deaths will buy time for others to live. Looking at a battlefield and deciding which lives matter more." Salara listened without speaking. She had never thought about war this way. Among her people, warriors followed orders and fought with honor. The weight of decisions fell on commanders and queens. But humans were different. They felt everything, carried everything. "There was a moment during the battle for your world," Daniel continued. "The Varath had surrounded a civilian transport. Thousands of your people, mostly children, trying to escape. I had 2 units available. I could send them to defend the transport, or I could send them to hold a bridge that would cut off the Varath advance. What did you choose?" "The bridge." His voice cracked slightly. "I chose the bridge because holding it would save more lives in the long run. But those children on the transport, I heard their screams over the radio when the Varath reached them. I hear them still. Every night when I close my eyes." Salara felt her heart tighten. "You could not save everyone. No one could. I know that here," he said, tapping his head. "But here," he touched his chest, "I feel like a murderer." They sat in silence. The stars were bright outside now, filling the sky with ancient light. Salara thought about all the times she had imagined meeting this man. In her mind, he had been a giant, a legend carved from stone. But here in this small kitchen, he was just a man. A man who had given everything and still felt like it was not enough. "I carry weight too," she said quietly. "Different from yours, but heavy in its own way." Daniel looked at her with interest. "A queen's burden?" "Yes, I rule 12 billion people across 40 worlds. Every decision I make affects lives I will never meet. Every mistake could cost millions." She paused. "I was raised on stories of heroes like you. I built my idea of leadership around those stories. The strong protector who always knows what to do, who never wavers, who carries the weight without complaint. And now? Now I see that the stories were incomplete. They showed the victories, but not the cost. They showed the strength, but not the wounds. She looked at him. Meeting you, seeing who you really are, it does not make you smaller in my eyes. It makes you more real. And it makes me feel less alone in my own struggles. Daniel studied her face for a long moment. Some of the hardness in his expression softened. You are young to be carrying such weight, he said. And you are too hard on yourself for carrying yours. A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. Maybe we are both fools. Maybe, she agreed. But at least we are honest fools. They finished their meal and moved to the porch outside. The night was cool and clear. Stars stretched from horizon to horizon, countless points of light representing worlds and peoples and histories beyond counting. Somewhere out there were the remains of the Varith swarm, scattered and broken. Somewhere out there were the graves of soldiers who had died following Daniel's orders. Can I ask you something? Daniel said, Of course. What do you want? Not what you think you should want, or what your duty demands. What do you actually want from coming here? Solara considered the question. It was something no one had ever asked her before. Queens were not supposed to want things for themselves. They were supposed to want for their people. I want to know that it was worth it, she said finally. The war, the losses, the sacrifices. I want to know that the people who died did not die for nothing. Daniel nodded slowly. I understand that. I want the same thing. And what else do you want? She asked him. He was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Peace. I want peace. Real peace, not just the absence of fighting. I want to wake up one morning and not feel the weight of all those lives on my chest. He looked at her. I want to believe that I deserve to be happy, but I do not know if I ever will. Solara reached out and placed her hand on his. It was a simple gesture, but it carried the weight of everything they had shared. You saved my life, she said. You gave me the chance to become who I am. Because of you, I can lead my people toward a better future. Because of you, millions of children grew up in peace instead of war. That is your legacy, Daniel. Not the lives you could not save, but the lives you did save. He looked at her hand on his. His eyes were wet, though no tears fell. I have not let anyone say things like that to me in a very long time, he said. Then perhaps it is time you started. They sat together on the porch as the night deepened around them. Two people from different worlds, shaped by the same war, finally seeing each other clearly. The past could not be changed. The dead could not be brought back. But maybe, just maybe, the living could find a way to carry on. And maybe that was enough. Morning came soft and golden over Haven's Rest. Solara woke in the small guest room Daniel had offered her. The bed was simple but comfortable, and she had slept better than she had in months. There was something about this place, this quiet world of fields and sky, that calmed the noise in her mind. She found Daniel already awake, sitting on the porch with a cup of tea and watching the sun rise over his crops. She joined him without speaking, and they sat together in comfortable silence as the day began. I should return to my ship soon, she finally said. My advisors will be worried. Daniel nodded. I figured as much. Queens do not get to disappear for long. No, they do not. She turned to look at him. Before I go, I want to ask you something. A request, not a demand. Ask. I will not force honors upon you. You have made your feelings clear, and I respect them. But I would like your permission to tell your story to my people. Not the legend, not the invincible hero who won the war. The truth. Daniel frowned. The truth? Yes. The story of a man who did what had to be done and paid a price for it. A man who saved millions of lives, but still carries the weight of those he lost. A man who found the courage to keep living, even when the war left scars that no one else could see. She paused. There are others out there like you, Daniel. Soldiers who fought and survived but feel broken inside. They need to know they are not alone. They need to know that even heroes struggle. Daniel was quiet for a long time. He stared out at his fields, at the life he had built from nothing on this distant world. When he spoke, his voice was rough. You really think my story could help people? I do. Not because it is a story of glory, but because it is a story of truth. And sometimes truth is what people need most. He thought about it. She could see the war happening behind his eyes, the old battles between pride and shame, between the need for privacy and the pull of something larger. Finally, he nodded. All right. If my story can help someone else carry their burden, then tell it. Tell all of it. Salara smiled. Thank you, Daniel. She stood and looked down at him. The morning light caught the gray in his hair and the lines on his face. He looked old and tired, but there was something new in his expression, something that might have been hope. Will I see you again? He asked. Perhaps. The galaxy is large, but it has a way of bringing people together when they need it most. She placed a hand on his shoulder. Take care of yourself. You deserve peace. Remember that. She walked back to her ship and departed Haven's Rest. As her vessel climbed through the atmosphere, she looked down at the small farmhouse one last time. A tiny speck on a world of endless fields. A man who had changed history, now tending his garden in silence. 2 weeks later, she stood before the great assembly of the Ethoni Dominion. Millions watched the broadcast across 40 worlds. More would see recordings in the days to come. This was her first major address since her coronation, and everyone waited to hear what their new queen would say. She did not speak of politics or treaties or the future of the Dominion. Instead, she told them a story. She told them about a human, soldier named Daniel Cole, who led a desperate charge against impossible odds. She told them how he saved their homeworld and turned the tide of the war. But she did not stop there, Dodd. She told them about the nightmares that followed, the guilt that haunted him, the faces of those he could not save. She told them how he refused every honor because he could not separate his victories from his losses. She told them about a quiet farm on a distant world where a broken man had learned to grow things instead of destroy them. And she told them about a little girl in a palace courtyard who owed her life to a stranger's kindness. A girl who had grown into a queen who traveled across the galaxy just to say thank you. Daniel Cole did not want to be called a hero, she said. He did not want statues or songs. He wanted peace. And that is what I want all of you to understand. Heroism is not about glory. It is not about being unbreakable. It is about doing what must be done, even when it costs you everything, even when no one else will ever understand the price you paid. She looked out at her people, at the millions of faces watching her. There are many like Daniel among us, soldiers who came home from the war with wounds that do not show, people who suffer in silence because they think they should be stronger. I want them to know that they are not alone, that their queen sees them, that their sacrifices mattered, even the ones that no one else remembers. The speech spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Humans in Ethoni and dozens of other species heard the story of Daniel Cole. Not the legend, but the man. And something shifted. On military bases and in veterans' homes, in quiet rooms and lonely apartments, people began to speak. They shared their own stories, their own guilt, their own hidden wounds. The silence that had held them for so long began to break. Daniel started receiving letters. They came from all over the galaxy. Soldiers who had fought alongside him, officers who had served under him, strangers who had never met him but who felt understood for the first time in their lives. They did not write to praise him. They wrote to thank him for showing them that it was possible to be broken and still worthy of life. One evening, as the sun set over his fields, Daniel sat on his porch and read one of the letters. It was from a young Ethoni veteran who had lost his entire unit during the war. For years, he had blamed himself. He had thought about ending his life more times than he could count. But after hearing Daniel's story, something changed. He reached out for help. He started talking about what he had been through. "You saved me," the letter said. "Not during the war, but after. You showed me that heroes can be broken too. And that broken does not mean worthless." Daniel set the letter down and looked up at the sky. The stars were coming out, one by one, filling the darkness with light. Somewhere out there, across an impossible distance, a young queen was looking at those same stars. He thought about her words on the porch that last morning. "You deserve peace." Remember that dot for the first time in years. He allowed himself to believe it might be true. On her throne world, Selara stood at her window and gazed up at the night sky. She thought about the farmer on his quiet world, reading letters from strangers who had found hope in his story. She thought about the weight they both carried and how sharing it had made it lighter. She whispered into the darkness, not knowing if he could somehow hear her across the vast emptiness of space, but feeling the need to say it anyway. "Thank you, Daniel, for saving me, for saving all of us. May you find the peace you deserve." And somewhere, on a small farm at the edge of human space, Daniel Cole looked up at those same stars and smiled. The war was over. The wounds would never fully heal, but for the first time in a very long time, he felt like he could finally start to live again. That was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.